Hello, and welcome all of you joining us today. Welcome to our generous financial supporters, our amazing volunteers, our food donor and distribution partners, our staff and board members, and a special welcome to those of you who are new to Extra Food. We are so happy all of you could join us to look back on Extra Food's 8 years of work, transforming our food system and serving people in need in Marin, and to look forward to what lies ahead. Some logistical details first. This is a forum style event, so only the speakers will be visible. We will be hosting a Q&A period at the end of the presentations at 5:30. So feel free to type in questions that you have for Marv at any time during the event. Your questions will be anonymous. During the event, we'll be hearing from Extra Food's founder and executive director, Marv Zotterer, as well as special guests, Katie Rice from the Marin County Board of Supervisors and Jonathan Logan from Marin Community Foundation. But first, we are proud to introduce our longtime financial partner and generous event sponsor, Amy Laughlin from Bank of America. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Amber, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to recognize Extra Food on this great milestone. I'm Amy Laughlin, and I work for Bank of America in Napa, Marin, and Sonoma. I'm the local market executive. That means that it's my job to make sure that we are a good corporate citizen and responding to what the needs are in the local community. As a bank, I just wanted to tell a couple of small things about who we are and what we do. And the way that we help drive progress on challenges that all of us are facing. It's really hard to separate the success of humans from the success of the planet. And we've set a goal to achieve carbon neutrality in our operations by 2020, or we had set it and achieved that a year ahead of time in 2019, and have now set a goal to reach net zero emissions in our operations and supply chain before 2050. We also really do a lot of work around the essentials, economic mobility, and especially around housing and food insecurity. Basically, you can't succeed if you can't eat. And I think you can probably tell where I'm going with this, which is that when I first met Marv and learned about the work that Extra Food was doing in both of those spaces at one time, it really was such an aha light bulb. Like, why weren't we doing this before? It makes so much sense to match extra food that was going to be going to waste with those who need it most. So it really is just such a beautiful synergy of bringing resources together and making our local community more successful, as well as doing the right thing by planet Earth. So we are delighted to be a supporter of Extra Food, really grateful to you for doing the hard work that needs to be done in the community. And congratulations to you today on your impact in the North Bay, on the wider planet, and on your accomplishments today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy. We are so grateful for Bank of America's continued support of Extra Food's work. Since Extra Food is one of the few county-wide safety net organizations, we work closely with our county government, not only working together on a daily basis to serve vulnerable people, but also and especially in times of natural disaster, community health crises, and other emergencies. I would now like to introduce one of Extra Food's longtime champions, Katie Rice from the Marin County Board of Supervisors.
Hi, Amber and Amy. Thank you so much for inviting me here today to celebrate Extra Food a little bit and Marv's vision. And I just really appreciate, Amy, your comments and the role that Bank of America has played in Extra Food's work around feeding the hungry, but also the planet piece of this. And like you said, it seems so obvious to be connecting these two dots, the extra food and the people in need, and then the co-benefits of addressing climate change, so huge But it took one person to actually kind of connect those dots. And I remember 8 years ago, young Marv, coming in, sitting in my office here at the Civic Center. He looked a little bit younger then, not too much younger. And Extra Food had just become a little bit more than a glimmer in his eye. And he came to my office into the county looking for some support. And I was inspired by his vision and had confidence in the tools he was putting at place. And so the county became a partner in a very small way. Now I would say we're partners in a much larger way. So to me, watching over these last 8 years, what Extra Food has done and what they become is really pretty incredible. Extra Food became a key player really very quickly in this effort to address hunger in Marin and to address food waste in Marin. But what they also did, which was really unique and I think now has propelled us to new heights as a collective, is Extra Food pulled together the people, the public agencies, and the organizations working in the hunger space and the climate space in ways we were never connected before. Indeed, I'd say that Extra Food really has been a catalyst in creating new partnerships and in creating new ways to collaborate across agencies, across communities, and even across industries to feed the hungry, to bring fresh local food and meals to those in need and do some good climate work in the process. So as I said, the county was an early funder of Extra Food. And we definitely invested in the mission, but as it turned out, when disaster struck, Extra Food started to play even a different role than we imagined. The organization during COVID played a critical role in helping us feed the families that were sheltering during when they were the COVID positive families that needed to shelter in place. Extra Food helped us keep them well fed and connected to community. They did the same thing when we had hundreds of folks coming from Sonoma and Napa during the wildfires, the North Bay wildfires during 2017, 18, and even 19. We set up these evacuation shelters, and Extra Food helped us make sure that those folks who were frightened, away from home, and didn't expect to be away from home, well fed, and also connected with each other and with the partners here in the county. Extra Foods become also has I think fulfilled on Marv's vision towards addressing the climate crisis. Specifically with the county, they work through Zero Waste Marin to establish this food waste reduction and food recovery work. And the key strategies the county is actually investing in and working on to reduce our GHG emissions and to keep all this high quality food out of the landfills and where it really should be in people's homes and kitchens and on their tables. So Mark's vision has more than come to fruition. And as I said, he's hardly aged in the process, and he's brought a whole lot of people along with him. So to close, I'm really glad to be here today to share my appreciation, the county's appreciation for Extra Food, to thank all the many partners and all the volunteers and all the donors and everyone new to Extra Food. Really so nice to be taking a look back and really excited to be looking forward and see what comes next for Extra Food and for this community. So with that, Amber, I will hand it back to you, and thanks again for including me tonight.
Thank you so much, Katie. We are so proud to work alongside you and all of your colleagues on the Board of Supervisors to do this important work. Next, I would like to introduce someone many of you know, Extra Food's very own founder and executive director, Marv Zotterer.
Thank you, Amber. Extra Food's wonderful development director, by the way. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Supervisor Rice, for your and the Board of Supervisors' support of Extra Food from the very beginning of our organization's work. I'd like to start by sharing a story. Laura, her husband, and their two kids moved from out of state to West Marin for her husband's new job. They arrived here, and through no fault of his, the job fell through. Now they were both unemployed for the first time in their lives. They watched their savings go to zero in an expensive county and talked with each other about what they could sell on Craigslist to make ends meet. Then Laura heard about a food distribution program ExtraFood started with a partner in West Marin for people who are struggling. Laura tells me she was reluctant to reach out to the program. She felt embarrassed. She and her husband had never had to ask for that kind of help before. But she says she had two kids at home to feed, so she started receiving the food that ExtraFood supplies for the program: fresh fruits and vegetables, dairy products, eggs, meat, prepared food, bread and baked goods, hiding some of it at home, she tells me, so her kids wouldn't eat it all at once. And then she heard where the food was coming from, and suddenly everything shifted for her because she had worked in grocery stores and restaurants and had been horrified by how much food was wasted there. Things shifted so much for her that she became an ExtraFood volunteer, taking her kids with her to rescue excess fresh food from businesses and schools throughout Marin and immediately deliver the food to our distribution partners like food pantries, after-school programs, churches, and senior housing centers. She did this to show her children that there are many, many people throughout Marin who struggle with hunger, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. And she did this so they could all feel part of the solution. Some months later, Laura's husband found a job, and they stopped needing to receive food through our program, a program she called a lifeline for her family during an unprecedented time. 8 years ago, we founded ExtraFood after learning some shocking facts. First, 35% of all food is wasted. As Laura saw, there's over-ordering and confusion about date labels on food in grocery stores and restaurants, more food at catered events than guests to eat it, and on and on. Second, food waste is a main cause of the climate crisis. If global food waste were a country, it would rank third in greenhouse gas emissions after the US and China, largely because food waste rotting in landfills emits methane, a gas with 86 times the global warming effect of carbon dioxide. And third, with so much food wasted and its resulting harm to our environment, 1 in 5 people in Marin, in ordinary times, still faces food insecurity, worrying about where their next meal will come from. Like the single moms with young children I worked with in Marin before starting ExtraFood, moms who were terrified they wouldn't have enough money to give their kids enough food, and sometimes they didn't. Like the kids at a Marin school where I worked who came to school without breakfast or lunch and hid their hunger from their teachers and friends. Like the homebound seniors who I delivered meals to through my synagogue and who told me stories of choosing between food and medication. And of course, with so many more like Laura's family, one job loss or one healthcare crisis away from not having enough food. All of this just broke my heart, and I thought, I feel so grateful to live here and have abundance here. We just can't be wasting all this food and hurting our planet doing it with so many people struggling. My founding board members and I saw an opportunity to fill a gap between those who have food and those who need it. And so ExtraFood was born. In launching the organization, we started from 3 interrelated principles that have guided everything we do. The first was that everything we do must start with the needs of the vulnerable people we serve throughout the entire county. And to do that, rather than reinventing the wheel, we'd work closely with the nonprofits in our community's safety net. Literally hundreds of organizations already providing services of all kinds to vulnerable people here. We'd work with these organizations to keep our fingers on the pulse of our community's food needs, keeping those needs in a massive database as our marching orders to find donations of excess food that match those needs. And by working through the safety net in Marin, we'd keep our organization lean and help the safety net be more effective, improving the efficiency of the charitable food distribution network here, and most importantly, providing more high-quality fresh food and reaching more people together. The second principle was that we would be community-based and community building. That's reflected in our focus on partnering with safety net organizations to meet community food needs, and it's also reflected in our focus on being true partners with food donors, picking up businesses and schools' excess food free of charge, 365 days a year, at their convenience. Like Chef Akira here of the Branson School, our very first food donor. Here's a photo of our very first pickup in 2013. And this focus on community led us to ask volunteers to be our food runners, to rescue and immediately deliver the food, and to be ambassadors for us out in the community with our food donor and recipient partners. Here are just a few. That's Marv at the top left. We call him Big Marv, of course, with his wife Sue. Marv joined us as a volunteer in our first months of operation, and this year completed his 800th delivery for Extra Food. And at the top right, here's Lee, the first volunteer to complete 1,000 deliveries. In our society, seniors are so often given the message that they are no longer needed, but that is definitely not the case at Extra Food. Both Marv and Lee are in their 80s, and more than 2/3 of our hundreds of volunteers are seniors. And just a quick shout out for the two women in the center of the group at the bottom right, Lynn and Ellen, both of whom have made enormous contributions to our work. Civic engagement is at the heart of Extra Food, and we are blessed to almost always have a wait list for volunteers who, like Lynn and Ellen and Big Marv and Lee and Laura, are among the most dedicated, passionate, generous people I have ever met. The third founding principle was the how of our work, that we would be an attuned, responsive, compassionate organization providing what we call food recovery with the human touch. The moment I knew we were on the right track was when I brought a Channel 5 TV news crew to one of our distribution partners, a senior housing center. One of the residents marched right up to the 6 p.m. news anchor and said, "I've got a story for you." I stepped back. I hadn't heard the story before. "I moved into this facility in 2009, she said, because I had lost my house in the mortgage crisis and had lost faith in my community. Being part of this food program has restored my faith in my community." So how does our program actually work? Here's an example. Several years ago, one of our close partners, Vivalon, came to us and said, "We have a home-delivered meals program that's in danger. We deliver 7 meals a week to chronically ill, homebound clients, mostly seniors, but our funding is about to run out. We don't have funding to replace it. Can you help?" It just so happened that Extra Food had daily donations of sealed, microwavable, mostly organic meals from Kaiser Hospital. Kaiser couldn't dare have too few meals for their patients, right? So I brought a few of the meals over to Vivalon. They said, "Hey, this hospital food is actually good. We'd love to have the donations." So that covered almost the entire budget of their program with only a small amount of overhead like gas to cover. So Vivalon asked the county to cover that, and the county said yes. So with Extra Food, Kaiser, Vivalon, and the county working together, we saved that program. And with delivering other meal donations to Vivalon that we've found for them over the years, together we've delivered more than 90,000 meals to the chronically ill in Marin. So after the first few years of gradually building capacity, two things happened that fundamentally leveled up our program. The first was the Sonoma and Napa wildfires in 2017. When people started fleeing the fires and streaming into Marin, we sprang into action. We called, sometimes multiple times per day, all the shelters springing up to house people, asking them about their food needs. We fielded food donation offers and solicited more food from our partners to meet the needs we were hearing. As the smoke started to cover Marin, we rescued food from canceled events like the 500 meals we redirected to the front lines in Santa Rosa for first responders. You can see a photo here of one of those brave people digging in. We responded to delivery requests from the Emergency Operations Center. We worked in Marin's main emergency shelter at the Civic Center, helping to meet the food needs for the the 500 people there and the incredible staff, mostly employees of the county's Health and Human Services Department. You can see some of them at the top right here. That experience set us on a new path to continually expand emergency response capacity within our organization, which we've since drawn on to serve federal employees whose income disappeared as a result of the federal government shutdown. You can see our volunteers at the bottom right here serving those federal employees a complete take-home dinner provided by our food donors. We also provided ready-to-eat food to vulnerable people who, of course, lacked refrigeration during power outages, and it ultimately led us to accelerate our impact growth during COVID, which I'll talk about shortly. The second big capacity building step around that time for Extra Food came, not coincidentally, shortly after the fires. West Marin, like Marin City and the Canal, is an area that lacks sufficient access to healthy, fresh, affordable food. We had been serving the San Geronimo Valley from the very first days of Extra Food, but we were constrained from getting out to the coast for a number of reasons, including the fact that volunteers who lived far away in other parts of Marin weren't always able to make the trip. At the same time, we saw an opportunity to increase our food supply if we could pick up donations offered to us that were too large for one or even two volunteers to pick up in their own vehicles. And we had seen during the fires the value of having a rental truck and doing pickups and deliveries that the county's emergency operations center needed. So, thanks to our generous investors, we raised more money, bought a refrigerated truck, and hired a staff driver. And that was truly a game changer for Extra Food in our community. And sometimes our grocery store partners include things other than food in their donation, like flowers. Here's Bill at the bottom left, our very first truck driver, delivering those to some of our close partners in Marin City. And since we've since purchased a refrigerated van as well, which you can see here, our terrific food recovery coordinator and van driver Trevor is wearing the Raiders cap there, second from the left. It's just been just tremendous to have our own vehicles and staff drivers boosting our capacity. But in our work regularly delivering food to the coast, I always think of an elderly couple in Point Reyes who lost their son, they tell us, at a young age, and after receiving meals from Extra Food said to us, "Whoever cooks these meals is an angel, and we believe our son sent that angel to us." That brings me to two enormous societal crises that have profoundly affected Extra Food's work over the past 2 years. The first is racial violence, the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many, many more have caused Extra Food to begin an ongoing long-term process of assessing and evaluating our own racial consciousness, for some of us confronting our privilege and biases, and determining how these learnings are best applied to our work going forward. At Extra Food, food justice is racial justice, and we already know there are ways linked with our mission that we can accelerate racial justice in this community. For example, there is so much inequity in access to healthy, fresh food in Marin. Over these 8 years, we've started 41 new food programs with our partners, particularly in areas such as Marin City, the Canal, and West Marin, where the inequities are profound, to expand equitable access to healthy, fresh food. Our partnership with our funding partner, Growing the Table, Agricultural Institute of Marin, and Performing Stars of Marin in Marin City is another example. We delivered more than 18 tons of excess fresh fruits and vegetables from small farms, particularly BIPOC-owned farms, to vulnerable people like this mother and child, preventing high-quality food, some of which you can see here, from going to waste, and supporting farmers whose income had been decimated by restaurant closures and further increasing equitable access to healthy, fresh food. And we bring people of different backgrounds together to work as equals, people who may otherwise have never met. I remember walking into our annual volunteer appreciation event a few years back and seeing a Black woman from our wonderful partner, People's Inner Cities Fellowship in Marin City, on one side of the crowded room, and one of our white volunteers who had been delivering food to that church for us for years on the other side. Just as I walked in, the crowd cleared a bit. They suddenly caught sight of each other and they ran toward each other and hugged. Sometimes repair in a community comes two people at a time. The second societal crisis is, of course, COVID. This is an extraordinary time for all of us, and the virus is creating challenges most of us have never faced. It is testing our resilience, it is testing our systems of care, and it has profoundly affected our community's most vulnerable people as we've seen their need for food skyrocket. Seniors who can't cook for themselves and are fearful about leaving home. Parents who have lost their jobs, some temporarily, some permanently. Kids who come to one of our distribution sites and ask for milk and eggs for their families. In the early part of the pandemic, with some of ExtraFood's partners shut down, we continued to maximize the impact of our food recovery program, sometimes battling smoke from wildfires at the same time, as you can see here, while refocusing our impact growth on our community meals program. Through that program, led by our very first employee, Kathy Carver, we used the excess capacity of restaurants and caterers to give freshly made meals, some of which were made with rescued ingredients, to people in need. We raised additional funding and paid our food partners a fair but low price, maximizing the number of meals we could provide while helping to keep food service businesses afloat and their workers employed. And we set up new distribution sites like this one at Our Lady of Loretto Church in Nevada that allowed people to drive through and pick up enough meals for their entire family. When they heard about our program, the county's Department of Health and Human Services approached us about a growing number of COVID positive folks they were concerned about. Many lived in close quarters and shared kitchen facilities with other families. Delivering prepared food is so important when people are sharing kitchen space, and so important for enabling COVID positive folks and their families to stay in their homes safely during their period of isolation. Could ExtraFood supply meals for these 500 people each week, the county asked? Yes. Ultimately, in addition to our ongoing food recovery deliveries, which have long since gone beyond pre-pandemic levels, ExtraFood has given more than 91,000 freshly made meals to people hit hardest by COVID. And in a project conceived by our volunteer coordinator, Donna Collings, our volunteers found the time to give us 1,200 handwritten thank you cards for our grocery store partners, true heroes during COVID. What are the outcomes of these 8 years of work by our small but mighty staff, our 750 volunteers, 300 food donors, 146 distribution partners, and many generous financial supporters? 5 million pounds of food rescued and delivered. With the 5 millionth pound delivered recently, as you can see here, from Nugget Market in Corte Madera to Marin Community Clinic in the Canal by these wonderful volunteers, Kathy and Josh. We reach more than 8,000 people with our deliveries. That's how we fight hunger here in Marin. And by keeping food out of landfills, we've eliminated the equivalent of the emissions from 11 million driving miles. That's how we fight the climate crisis right here in Marin. What's ahead for ExtraFood? Before I go there, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Logan, VP of Community Engagement for the Marin Community Foundation, for his countywide perspective on ExtraFood's work.
Mar, first off, let me thank you for this invitation to speak, and congratulations to you and all of the ExtraFood staff and volunteers. Your success today is nothing short of amazing, and I couldn't be more proud of ExtraFood and the team, the many volunteers. 5 million pounds of food, healthy food recovered is very noble and remarkable. As we all know, it reduces greenhouse emissions. And we know why that's important for us to collectively set as a goal and work towards. But let me say that while rescuing food is noble for all of the reasons that we know and that Marv, you just shared, delivering it to thousands of children, families, seniors in Marin who would otherwise go without food. That's justice. That's justice, and that's what it looks like in action. So if you're like me, you take eating multiple meals a day for granted. It's not about if you'll eat; it's when and what you'll eat, and how much. For this reason, Extra Food has a role that goes beyond just being a food distributing organization. It's actually an important mirror for us in society and for Marin. It helps us all see the blind spots that we have, see the places where needs exist that often go unseen by the majority of people. And so Marv and team, we thank you for holding up that mirror to us all, giving us an opportunity to find ways in which we can see the unseen, volunteer and help where help is needed. Give us an opportunity to better ourselves as a society, because when we're all doing good, that's when we're at the peak of who we can really be as a community. And so Marv, you and team, you guys have demonstrated innovation, something at the foundation that we truly appreciate. You sprung into action during the pandemic. It was beautiful to see, and we were happy to know that you were out there. You've never been shy about sharing information with us and keeping us up to speed on just what's going on in your world and ultimately our world. And we've just been so appreciative of the relationship. The last thing that I'll just kind of close out on is that delivering food and supporting individuals at that level is extremely important. But one thing that folks might not know about Marv and Extra Food and the team there is that they've taken a policy approach to much of the work. And so taking the good learnings that they all have and that they've been able to glean as part of their work, they're now informing cities, towns, and the county in terms of how they can do this work as a way to fight climate change and move towards policy solutions for much of this very important work. And so we thank you for that. This is not easy work, but it's rewarding work and it's necessary work. And so on this day, as you guys are celebrating 5 million pounds recovered and delivered from the Marin Community Foundation, we just want to say thank you and congratulations.
Oh my, thank you so much, Jonathan. Well, what's ahead for Extra Food? We hear far more requests for food than we have supply. And so our first big goal is to make food recovery a way of life in Marin, to enroll every Marin business and school that ever has excess food in our program, and to rescue every pound of that food for people in need. Going forward, you'll see us accelerate toward that goal by increasing our direct outreach to prospective food donors, expanding awareness of our program through co-marketing partnerships in a variety of social channels, and building our rescue and delivery capacity. You'll see us reach more people through innovative channels for food distribution, and we'll seek out new ways to respond to crises and alleviate hunger, to be a lifeline for more people like Laura's family during unprecedented times. Our wonderful volunteer, Kristen, once said something to me that I haven't forgotten. She said, "Extra Food connects the heart to the body. Extra Food connects generosity and gratitude, and Extra Food connects people to each other." And indeed, when I think of Extra Food, I think of people. Our staff and board, extraordinary people of tremendous passion, dedication, and skill. Our funders, individuals, foundations, governments, and corporations expanding their inspiring generosity to allow us to do more for our community. Our partners, like the employee at a grocery store who told me the other day he was on the receiving end of food donations growing up in Marin, and that's why he makes a special effort to set aside excess food for us to pick up. Our volunteers, like the wonderful woman from Vietnam, explaining her escape from there many years ago as a boat person being in a refugee camp in Malaysia for a year with nothing to eat except a little rice and salt each day, volunteering for Extra Food because she knows what it's like to be hungry. And the people we serve, like the man in Marin City with a terminal illness, texting us photos of the fresh food he received from us and thanking us for the nutrition he so desperately needed but could not afford. Together, we are ending hunger differently. Differently because we're leading a movement to change Marin's food system from wasting food to donating it. Differently because we're sharing the abundant resources of our community with our community. And differently because we're using our nimble model to harness the power of our community and respond quickly to the most urgent of needs. Extra Food was founded on a vision of food justice, that everyone in our community should have the food they need. A vision of climate action, that food waste and its massive harm to our planet must end. And a vision of community, that by building a living, growing coalition of partners and people like all of you, we can get there. Food waste and hunger in Marin are solvable problems. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke often of the beloved community. In that vision, our community's abundance is shared. Sharing abundance so all may thrive. May we bring that day in this community.
Thank you so much, Marv. And thank you, Amy, Katie, and Jonathan. And thank you to everyone for attending and for supporting the important work Extra Food and our partners are doing every day out in our community. If you are interested in learning more about our work and how you can be involved and support us, I will include a couple of links in the chat here. I will also send a post-event email to all participants that will include these links, as well as a link to the recorded event. So you can share that link with anyone you think may be interested in hearing about what Extra Food is doing in the community. Marv is now going to answer some of your questions. So if you haven't had a chance already, you're welcome to type a question in the Q&A section of the webinar at the bottom. As a reminder, all questions will be anonymous. Once again, I will hand it over to Marv.
Thank you, Amber. Well, let's see. So, questions. What is Extra Food's biggest challenge? Well, you know, we're in a behavior change challenge. You know, if we look at businesses and schools in the community and, you know, all over the world, we have, you know, in many cases, decades of people throwing great food away. And so we have a challenge around persuading the decision makers at these businesses and schools to change that. You know, there's a lot of inertia behind it, but I think we've been successful because we've been able to articulate, you know, some key benefits. You know, obviously it's a way for them to make another difference in the community. It saves them money on having food disposed of, hauled away. There are actually sweet tax benefits that the federal government has put in place. And, you know, it's free of charge, and we pick it up from them whenever they want, 365 days a year. So generally, if we get a chance to get to the right people and you know, present those benefits, as we so often do, you know, we have a good success rate. Another question, I mentioned working with Vivalon. Are we working with any other nonprofit organizations as a collaboration to distribute food? Yes. So we've delivered food to 146 nonprofits throughout Marin, in you know, throughout all corners of Marin. So any nonprofit in Marin that's serving vulnerable people can be part of our program. They can apply to be part of our program. And in many cases, the nonprofit might have a food program already. We might be in touch with a food pantry or whatnot. But as I mentioned, we've started 41 new food programs with nonprofit partners because we've looked for nonprofits in particular areas of Marin and so on, who we saw are serving vulnerable people but not doing food yet. And, we approach them and say, hey, would you guys like to distribute food with us? And, so many of them have said yes. And so working together, we've expanded what we might call the food safety net in Marin. So those nonprofits are, churches and synagogues and senior housing centers and senior centers and homeless shelters and food pantries. And there are, of course, many, many different types of nonprofits here serving vulnerable people and providing a variety of critically needed services to those who are struggling in our community. Other questions? Other questions? Is extra food being used as a model for other cities and counties yet nationally? Yeah, so what we've found over the years is that we get phone calls from organizations around the country that are food recovery organizations and starting up. And so we share with them what we've learned. We share best practices. We, give them some advice on things to avoid and that are difficult or whatnot, learnings that we have had through the years, and we're delighted to pay it forward in that way. Another question: do we have a new executive director chosen yet? If not, where are you in the process? So some of you may know, and some of you may not, that earlier this year, I announced that I'll be stepping away from Extra Food by the end of the year. And we are very fortunate, A, to have a wonderful board of directors, and B, to have a member of our board of directors who's a national leader in executive search. So he's chairing our executive director search committee. That committee hired a search firm some time ago, and the board is busily interviewing candidates to become my successor. So when we have more news on that, you will hear. Let's see, other questions. Questions about other organizations that do what we do in the Bay Area and statewide and nationally, and sort of what kinds of coordination there is. And yes, there are organizations around the country that we work with, and including in the Bay Area itself. So not only do new organizations contact us, but over the years, through various means, us reaching out to them reaching out to us, conferences where, we're all presenting, that kind of thing. We've made quite a number of connections with other organizations, and we do a lot of sharing best practices and collaborating in that way to kind of make the network greater than the sum of its parts. So I think that's going to be about our time. So I want to thank everybody for attending. Thank you for all of your wonderful, wonderful questions. And as Amber said, you'll be receiving a follow-up email with various links. I hope that Amber's going to put the links in the chat that she mentioned if she hasn't already. And thank you again for being here. Take care.